He saw something no one else could see, and spoke it aloud. For that, they called him insane and locked him away. But one listener couldn't stop hearing his voice, and the more she listened, the more she began to question. What if he isn't the one drowning?
Whispers from the threshold invisible. Discover the hero within.
Part 1. The Judgment. The sound of Julian's voice had once filled his small apartment like incense, soft, lingering, and oddly cleansing. Now it echoed in a courtroom, clipped into sound bites and played through tinny speakers under fluorescent lights that buzzed with passionate indifference. A woman in the front row mouthed along with his words. A man in the back scrolled his phone. The judge listened, or pretended to, her mouth resting on her fist like she was holding up a collapsing wall. Julian sat still, uncuffed, but surrounded by uniforms. His hair was unkempt. Not out of control, unattended. His clothes were unremarkable. His silence disturbed people more than his podcast had. "Mr. Hale," said the judge finally. "This episode, The War in the Sky, you published it the day after the Jerusalem strike?" He nodded once. "You claimed you saw angels and demons above the city?" He paused. "I didn't claim. I described." Her gaze sharpened. "Do you believe what you described is the truth?" Julian's eyes lifted toward the ceiling, not evasive, thoughtful. "It's not a matter of true or untrue. It's what I saw." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Someone chuckled and was quickly shushed by the bailiff. The prosecution leaned into the microphone. "The state contends that Mr. Hale's material, while stylized, constitutes a destabilizing narrative. His audience is emotionally vulnerable. There's precedent. He's been cited in 3 minor incidents, including a group refusing medical treatment and a student walkout. We're requesting 90 days observation under Statute 42. See? And if he refuses?" the defense asked. "Then we move for full psychiatric evaluation and confinement under civic order violation." The judge sighed as if she'd lost a coin in a drain. "Mr. Hale," she said, almost gently, "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting others. We'll reconvene in 90 days. The gavel struck. The voice fell silent. And just like that, Julian was swallowed into the system. Dr. Evelyn Maris opened the file on a Friday afternoon. It was a grey day. Were it not for her sister's birthday party the weekend prior, she would have easily forgotten whether it was October or March. "Julian Hale," the file said. 34, former adjunct professor, now full-time, content creator. Diagnosis, provisional. Paranoid features, possible messianic complex. Flag, narrative risk. Recommendation, observe, stabilize, discourage delusional reinforcement. Attached was a link to his most recent podcast. She didn't click it, not immediately. Instead, she stared at the intake photo. He didn't look unstable. He looked tired, like someone who had seen too much light in a world full of darkness. Julian didn't speak during their first session. She asked the standard questions. He offered a blink, a nod, silence. She could feel the wall between them, thick, but not impenetrable. More like a fog, a protective fog. "You're not being punished," she said, tapping her pen. "You're here for observation." "Observation is what got me here," he murmured, his voice hoarse. She blinked. "You mean being seen by someone?" "No." He looked up. "Seeing." That night, Evelyn sat in her kitchen, the lights dim, a glass of wine untouched beside her laptop. She clicked play. Julian's voice poured through her earbuds. I watched them, not with eyes, but with something behind my ribs. The angels were not soft. They were blinding. And the demons, they didn't crawl, they circled. They knew the names of cities and the passwords to phones. And the war we think is new has been burning for centuries, just beneath the skin of our attention. She didn't notice she was holding her breath until the episode ended. The wine stayed untouched. The file stayed open. And something inside her, something that had been carefully tucked away over the years, began to stir. Part 2. The Drowning Room. The facility was called Crescent Valley, though no valley curved nearby, and nothing about it was crescent. The windows were long, sealed, and grey-tinted, as if built to prevent too much sky from peering inside. Julian's room was minimal, but clean. He didn't decorate. He didn't pace. He drew. On paper napkins, appointment cards, scraps of paper clipped from magazines. Wings. Eyes. Shapes that spiraled in on themselves, like mazes or seeds. He taped them to the wall beside his bed. He didn't call it art. He didn't call it anything. Evelyn began their second session the same way as the first, with patience, posture, practiced neutrality. You draw a lot, she said. Julian shrugged. Do you know what you're drawing? He looked at her as though she'd asked whether he knew what he was breathing. I'm remembering. She shifted in her chair. Remembering a dream? Before the dream. He didn't elaborate. He rarely did. Outside the sessions, Evelyn typed her notes in bland clinical jargon. Patient exhibits flattened affect. Delusional imagery persists, denies hallucination. Language poetic, but detached. But that night, she made an entry into her private journal for the first time in over 7 years. He's not chaotic. He's still. That's what unsettles them. He says less, but it resonates longer. I don't know if he's mad. I do know he's not afraid. 3 weeks into treatment, Julian stopped drawing. He stared at the walls instead. In group therapy, he was silent until someone asked a question about safe spaces. He said, "Safe for whom?" The room went quiet. "For the truth?" he added, "or for the people who fear it?" The next night, Evelyn dreamed she was underwater. She wasn't drowning, but suspended. Above her, in the blurry air, were wings of fire, not burning her, just watching. She didn't mention the dream in supervision the next day. She stuck to metrics, to vocabulary that kept her licensed. That kept her safe. But the dream lingered. Her supervisor called her into his office on a Thursday. "I'm reading your notes on Hale," he said, holding the file like it might be contagious. "You haven't flagged him for extension." "He's coherent," Evelyn said. "He's eccentric, but he's not violent. He speaks in metaphors, but he is not incoherent." Mathis raised an eyebrow. "You're aware he believes angels are at war with each other over US foreign policy." "He never said that." "But it's implied in his podcast." Evelyn met his gaze. "Since when do we hospitalize people for implication?" Mathis leaned back. "Look, I'm not ordering anything, but this case is delicate. And you're too good to get pulled into it emotionally. Just be smart." He smiled, like a knife behind glass. The next day, she brought in headphones and played his podcast in their session. Episode 41. The War in the Sky. Julian flinched. "You shouldn't listen to that," he whispered. "Why?" He swallowed. "Because you'll start to remember." "Remember what?" Julian closed his eyes. "The sword." Then he began to hum, low, soft, like the wind moving through dry reeds. and then he collapsed. The staff found no physical abnormalities. Heart normal, vitals stable. They sedated him anyway, because of, quote, protocol. Evelyn protested quietly. That was protocol too. When she returned to his room the next day, he was lying still, eyes half-lidded, arms limp. She sat beside the bed, unsure whether he heard her. "I had the dream," she whispered. Silence. "You were in it?" she said. His fingers twitched. She leaned closer. "You weren't drowning, Julian. You were floating, but the water was too deep for me. I didn't know how to stay in it." His voice, thin as paper. "That's because you never learned to fall." Evelyn felt the air shift, and in that moment, she knew what she had to do. Part 3. The Return. The forms were waiting on her desk Monday morning. 2 pages. Language that's just a little bit too polite. Phony administrative smiles etched in ink. Patient exhibits sustained delusional affect and non-normative associative language. Recommendation? Extended evaluation and indefinite observation. All she had to do was sign. She didn't sign. Evelyn closed the door. She opened Julian's file one last time. Not on the screen, but in her mind. The dream, the voice, the question he had asked weeks ago. Safe for whom? She walked down the hallway past the cameras and the slow-turning fans. Her heels echoed like a metronome. When she entered his room, Julian was sitting up, awake, unmedicated, waiting. He looked better than she expected, or maybe she was feeling worse than she expected. "I'm not signing the order," she said simply. He studied her, as if searching for cracks in her tone. When he found none, he nodded once. "Thank you," he said. Evelyn sat across from him, not as a clinician, but as a human being, one who had grown tired of falsehood. "I don't understand what you've seen," she said. "I'm not even sure if you understand it, but I believe you saw something that is true and very real." Julian tilted his head. "It's not about the seeing, it's about the staying." She looked puzzled. "You stayed," he said. "Most people flee the moment something real shows up. They call it insanity so they won't have to face it." Julian was released under conditional discharge 2 days later. The official language was diplomatic. No acute threat, stable under observation. His travel was restricted. He moved into a quiet flat across town, above a bakery that never asked questions. He considered rebooting the podcast, but wasn't quite ready. Evelyn turned in her resignation that Friday. Dr. Mathis didn't look surprised. "I hope you land on your feet," he said. She smiled faintly and said, "I was never off them." The final meeting was unplanned. A park, early spring. The trees still bare, the air just warm enough to sit without shivering. Julian was on a bench, feeding birds. Evelyn approached slowly, unsure if it was intrusion or instinct. He glanced at her. "You've started recording." She blinked. "How did you—" "I felt the shift," he said, smiling. "Like a river changing course." She sat beside him. "I didn't know what to say at first," she confessed. "I just told the truth. That's enough." They sat in silence, the kind that's earned, not forced. Then Julian spoke, so softly she almost missed it. "They're still fighting." "Who?" "The angels, and the others. But some of them have started to sing." That night, Evelyn adjusted the mic in her modest home studio. No script, no intro music, just her breath, steady. The room dim, but alive. She pressed record. "They say the mystic swims in the same waters in which the madman drowns. I used to think the difference was sanity. I think now it's something simpler. The mystic remembers to breathe. She paused. Then, smiling faintly, she whispered, "Welcome to the first episode of The Drowning Room."
This has been a production of the Artists Agora, which you can find on the web at artistagora.com. All stories written and produced by James D. Newcomb.